Hello and welcome back to another episode of Hollywood Wargaming. Today we have some exciting info on the bolt action front, as Warlord Games has just announced a new starter set for bolt action, one that is very much a proper starter set that is now currently available for pre-order off the Warlord Games website for $142 US, plus shipping, which will bump it up to about $155, but you can get around that if you do decide to buy it in store. But let's go ahead and jump right in and just take a look at what this box set offers and break down the overall value here. And the first thing we are very plainly going to see here is that this is a North African theater box set, something that I know may turn away a lot of potential buyers just because they're more interested in something like the war in Europe or the Eastern Front, which I totally get. North Africa is kind of the hipster theater, and I do get that players don't want to box themselves into that early mid-war phase and not be able to get some of those cool late-war technology items. However, if you know me and my channel, you know that I am a huge fan of the North African theater. My grandfather was actually a part of a 40mm Bofors team and saw action in Tunisia and Sicily. And my bolt action collection, which started as a small Afrika Korps army, has pretty much become a full-blown theater collection at this point, including British, Italians, Americans, and French of both the French Foreign Legion and Vichy. So you could definitely say that I'm a fan of this battlefield setting. And for those of you who aren't really into the North African theater, let me go ahead and throw a few things your way about this box set that I find to be really big positives. First of all, the Afrika Korps and British 8th Army box sets are fantastic kits. They're both relatively new, and the sculpts in them are really just A+. I especially love the Afrika Korps heads that have the bandana and goggles, and the British 8th Army troopers that have the Thompsons with the box mags and foregrips. They just have a lot of character to them, and they paint up really well. Though I will say this, that the British 8th Army are significantly easier to paint than the Afrika Korps, and that's mainly just due to the variations in their uniform and webbing. But there is another huge advantage that both of these factions share, and that's the fact that desert basing is really easy to do. All you really need to do is slap some Armageddon dunes on there and dry brush it and you're done. Or you can get a little bit more creative with the Grelin earth and some tufts. Or you can go the old school route and just sprinkle some sand on there before you prime. It's all really easy to do. But with our setting out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual contents of this box set. And first up, I want to make two big notes here. That is a major improvement over a lot of the other bolt action starter sets that we've seen. And that is one, the fact that this is a symmetrical box set, and two, that this is actually a proper starting set that does come with rules and templates and other utensils such as order dice that you need to play. And if you guys are familiar with my content, you know that I have been pretty hard on Warlord about that. Bolt action is a great game, Warlord Games has great models, but there's always been this kind of clumsy beginner's hurdle getting into the game for people, and it seems like Warlord Games is finally addressing that and taking steps to remedy it. So let's take a look at those symmetrical sides, starting off with the infantry. Each of the factions is going to be getting 4 sprues here. Each sprue will contain 6 bodies to build infantry models, meaning you will have a total of 24 for each side. That is 1 sprue less than your standard infantry box set that you would buy off Warlord Games, which usually contains 30 models. And right off the bat, I gotta say, I love this. This is so big and one of my biggest issues with the Band of Brothers starter set. 24 models is the perfect amount for a new player to have in their lap in order to comfortably build the foundation of their collection. You have enough models for 2 squads of 8 to 10 men, and also some wiggle room to build some special weapons and a commanding officer. After that, we are going to see that both sides do have an armored vehicle here, with the Germans sporting a 222 and the British with a Humber Mark II. Another exciting thing about both of these vehicles is that they are in fact new plastic kits from Warlord Games, which is a huge upgrade over the old resin, especially for new players getting into the hobby, and they are the perfect candidates to fill out that niche armored car slot in the reinforced platoon, so new players can have a more forgiving unit to get the feel of how vehicles work in bolt action, and then get along to buy some tanks with their future purchases. So in terms of actual models, we are going to be getting 24 infantry and 1 armored car for both sides, and that's pretty much perfectly symmetrical. And because this is an early mid-war campaign box set, it's kind of this perfect balance of rock, paper, scissors between the units you're going to get here, as the bulk of your force is going to be mostly infantry, which is obviously good at fighting other infantry and getting objectives, but then you will also have the armored cars with their light autocannons that are very good at killing infantry, however are very lightly armored and susceptible to fire from those anti-tank rifles, who they themselves are pretty vulnerable to infantry and only really excel at fighting light armor, which means that new players facing off against each other with the contents of this box set are really going to have to use combined arms strategically in order to win a match. And in my opinion, it's just the perfect mix of introductory units, not just for how to learn how to play the game, but also for starting a collection. And also, going back to my sales pitch of the North African Theater, the rules and mechanics of Bolt Action really excel, in my opinion, in that early and mid-war setting more so than the late war. And that's mostly because of how poorly vehicles tend to scale in terms of points investments versus return in the later war setting of this game. There seems to be a lot more reliance on luck of the dice when you're pushing around heavy tanks with heavy AT guns, or even medium tanks for that matter. And it really feels bad when you miss, it feels bad when you blow up. And you know what, when that vehicle does do good, it probably feels bad for your opponent. Meanwhile, in the early and mid-war settings when you have things like tankettes and armored cars rolling around, things just feel more balanced, it feels like they're there to support the infantry, and it doesn't feel like the game is decided by swingy dice. But moving on from there, we are going to have the rest of the contents of this box set, which of course are our rules and mechanics, which we need to play. And the first up here is going to be the notorious order dice. This is maybe one of the biggest hurdles for getting into this game for new players, and it's one that I've really griped about against Warlord Games for quite some time now. New players do not want to have to spend $30 on dice. They would much rather spend that money on a new tank or other models to expand their collection. Now, this box set, for the most part, has done it right. It appears that we are getting 6 dice for each side here. That's more than enough activations for both sides if you're fighting with just the contents of this box set. And if you're buying this box set yourself, you can combine those 2 dice and use them as your 12 order dice, provided your opponent is not using one of the 2 colors here. So you are getting a complete set of 12 dice. But if you are splitting the box set with a friend, I would suggest that one of you takes these 12 dice and another one buys, or perhaps you split another pack of dice, so you both have 12. It's not something you have to do immediately, but if you guys both grow your collections, you will eventually need 12 dice to play full-scale matches of Bolt Action. So while the dice hurdle isn't completely solved here, it is way better than the 10 dice you get in Band of Brothers, and it does get my seal of approval. After that, we are going to get some standard Chessex looking dice here. I would recommend that new players go out and buy a new set of dice, just so you have enough for that giant buzzsaw squad, and then you can use these dice as something like pin markers, which does segue us to our next item, which is of course the pin markers. An item that I think I've only seen one person use for their intended purpose in my entire career of Bolt Action. Most people I've seen just use them as markers for incoming artillery, though I guess if you're starting off you could use them for objective markers also. But overall, they are pretty terrible at their intended purpose of being a dial to count pins, and using a d6 for pins just seems to be the way quicker and preferred method of most Bolt Action players. But after that, we are going to have our template and other markers here. Now, the templates are super useful. You don't need to use them. You can make your own templates, as they are just 1 to 4 inch diameter circles. But it is nice to have them. But as for those little dog tag markers, I don't really see anyone use those either. It feels like they're just there to fill out the sprue. Which is honestly fine, because these things are always on sale or bundled in with other box sets, like here. So, whatever. But last up here, we are going to be getting our little paperback Bolt Action 2nd edition rulebook. Very much a staple item in a starter set. And while it may be a bit of a handicap having the smaller edition for your first read-through of the rules where you have to digest all that information, it is a great carry item to bring along with you to your hobby shop when you have to look up rules on the fly. So that wraps up the full contents of this box set here. In terms of what is actually in the box here, I think this is pretty much a perfect starter set. You have pretty much all of the rules and tools you need to start playing, and you also get 2 symmetrical forces that are going to interact with each other quite nicely. Now, look, I'm not against asymmetry in box sets like this. Actually, I'm a huge fan of it. But for a starter set for new people getting into the game, you can't give someone 2 sprues of infantry and say, make a reinforced platoon. However, while I am a very big fan of the content of this box set, I'm going to sour a little bit on the value here. I have all the numbers laid out on the screen here, with each sprue of infantry coming in around $11. That is going to give you a total value of around $90 for all the infantry here, and $80 for the 2 armored cars. And while I do find that value for the infantry to be quite fair, I've always found Warlord's vehicles to be a little bit on the pricey side, even before the latest price increase. A lot of their Western Desert vehicles were previously resin and metal kits, which I assume the price was a little bit higher because of cost of materials. But here we have plastic kits coming in at the same mark. And to be quite honest, these are just pretty tiny models that don't have a whole lot of parts to them. And if you go and compare these to some of the Imperial Guard vehicles on Games Workshop sites, you kind of feel like you're getting Warhammer prices here. Now, if these retailed at $30 to $35, I probably wouldn't have any complaints. But that being said, we are currently at $170 value with just the models here, no utensils or rules, which means in a way you kinda are getting these vehicles for about $30 each, and then getting the rulebook, order dice, and utensils thrown in there for free. And that's really the biggest thing I've been barking at Warlord over the last few years. Give new players rules and tools for free when they bundle buy. They already pretty much have to match their investment on the models with paint, brushes, and glue. Don't make them triple down by having to spend another $80 on rulebooks and tools. So overall, with $251 worth of value here, you are essentially getting 40% off of this bundle. Though I'll be really blunt with you, I find it difficult to justify calculating that rulebook and those templates and pin markers into the overall value, especially at MSRP price. Not only do they go on sale all the time, you really don't need the templates at all to play, and I'll be blunt, you can find the rulebook all over the internet for free. I'm not saying you should do that, I really do not endorse that, but I do think the paperback and PDF rulebooks are overpriced for what they are. So if you negate the rulebook and those templates from the perceived value of this box set, you're looking at something that's a little bit more around the 30% discount range for a bundle buy, which overall is a little bit underwhelming for a starter set, but it still is one of the best ones we've seen yet for bolt action, and its contents definitely earn it a solid recommendation from me to new players, especially with Band of Brothers coming in at $133 now. You're just getting a way better package here. And while I do wish the value was overall a little bit better, it still is value. And it is really cool to see multiple new plastic kits coming out in one box set, and just to see that Warlord in general is updating their line. So while this doesn't quite meet that gold standard of intro box sets like Star Wars Legion, it definitely gets my seal of approval, and a big tip of the hat to Warlord for solving what I will retroactively call the starter set problem. But if anyone at Warlord is listening to this, let me give you a tip. If you want to make big bucks, reskin this exact same set for Normandy and then also the Eastern Front. But lastly here, I do have one additional surprise for you guys because I know you're going to be asking me in the comments section, how would I recommend building the contents of this box set? Well, let's go ahead and break it down here. First of all, I would recommend you build mirror forces here, especially if you're splitting it with a friend. Like I said, this box set lends itself to a nice diverse, small reinforced platoon with a nice rock, paper, scissors mechanics between the opposing forces. And building both of your forces this way is not only going to give you some fair balanced matches, but also give you a nice diverse foundation to start your collection on, and also let you experiment with the various mechanics of the game. Now, first up here for both sides, we are going to be building 4 guys wielding submachine guns, one of which is going to be your commanding officer, and I would recommend distinguishing this officer by giving him one of the peaked cap heads. And if you really want that British officer wielding the pistol and blowing that whistle, go ahead and just equip him with a pistol. You can just say he's using a submachine gun, and no one's really going to have a problem with that. Now, one of the other submachine gunners here is going to be your assistant to your officer. As you may or may not know in bolt action, your officers can have up to 2 cronies alongside them, which will give them a little bit of extra firepower and wounds for durability. However, if you do equip 3 guys in this unit, you lose the small team special rule, so it's pretty much a bolt action pro tip to equip him with just 1 extra crony. And considering that their weapon upgrades are free, it's pretty commonplace to give them a special weapon like a submachine gun. Now, the other 2 submachine gunners that you have left over are going to be your 2 squad leaders, or NCOs, for your 2 infantry squads. As you may or may not know, a reinforced platoon in bolt action requires a commanding officer and then at least 2 squads, and it is pretty commonplace for your NCOs in those squads to be taking a special weapon like a submachine gun. Next up, we are going to have the backbone of those 2 squads, which of course are your standard riflemen, which we are going to have 16 of each for both sides. Now, 4 of these 16 riflemen are going to be assistants to a special weapon team, and these are best indicated by a guy carrying a rifle and then also an ammo box, though sometimes just having him being a squatting rifleman can be enough to signify that he's the loader or assistant, as the special weapon gunners are usually themselves in prone. So it makes sense that the guy next to him kneeling is part of his weapons team. So all 4 of these guys don't necessarily need to be carrying ammo crates. Just keep in mind that you are going to need 4 riflemen who stand out as a part of a special weapon team. After that, we are going to build 2 machine guns for each side. These LMGs will slot into your standard infantry squads and make use of one of those loaders, and give you some more long-range firepower to toy around with. Next up, we are going to have the first of our special weapon teams, which is going to be the anti-tank rifles. These weapons really excel against enemy targets like armored cars, And having them face off against your 222s and Humbers is really going to give you a good understanding of how armor penetration and vehicle destruction works in this game. And even for the more veteran players, it is really handy to have a cheap activation with an anti-tank rifle team, as they are their own two-man independent squad operating in the anti-tank slot of your reinforced platoon. And of course, this special weapon is going to be pairing up with one of those loader riflemen that you built earlier. This will also apply to our next special weapon, which is going to be the light mortar. Now, I'll be honest with you, the light mortar isn't the most impressive weapon in bolt action, but for new players, I would recommend building it so you can figure out how the indirect fire mechanics work in this game. But that being said, you could sub this one out for perhaps another LMG or another submachine gunner, or perhaps even just another rifleman to pad out your squads further. It's probably the least mandatory one here, but I would recommend just having it in your collection, especially if you think you're going to be going head to head with the contents of this box set more than a couple times, as the mortar does introduce a whole new mechanic into this battle scenario. But that is going to wrap up how I recommend building this box set. I will say this, you may have the option to build the SDKFC 222 or the 223. If you do, just build the 222 because the 223 does not have the autocannon, which will hold you back if you plan on fighting that Humber a lot. But thank you guys for listening. Let me know what you think about this box set in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and press the like button, turn on notifications, all that fun stuff. And until next time guys, take care.